So, hey, I'm Jordana. I'm CEO of the RECON Network. We are, like Brenna said, we are focused on the human element of veteran transition. So when I say that, like, what does that mean? Well, as you're transitioning, you have either realized or you will realize that 90% of the organizations out there are really focused on helping you find a job, which is great. I mean, that's a really, really integral part of the transition. However, it is not the only part of transition. There's a lot that goes into making a seamless transition that actually puts you where you want to be at the end of it, right? So we're going to look at things like purpose and meaning. How do you define your own identity, and how do you find the type of job that fits your inherent purpose as an individual? How do you learn soft skills like goal setting or time management where you may not have had to do that in the past? We focus on stuff like values, setting your own mission statements, all of those kinds of things that really are designed to help you really settle into who you are as an individual outside of the military. So, I think Brenna and I had a webinar a while back, and we were kind of joking, like, when you're in the military, you have great time management because someone tells you where to be. You have an identity because someone tells you who you are. You have a job fit because someone told you what to do. And so, as you go through that stage and then transition into really the corporate world, which is vastly different, you don't have the brotherhood or sisterhood around you. You don't necessarily have anyone who cares if you're on time or not, outside of the fact that you're going to make them late or inconvenience them to some effect. You have all these changes that are just very, very different from the culture that the military provides. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a very different thing. So that's what the RECON Network does. That is our focus. That is our mission. We do that in a number of different ways. One is through something we call transition check-ins. And transition check-ins are something you can go online to our website and schedule according to your own schedule, 30 minutes with a certified life purpose coach. And at that meeting, talk about anything. Usually that is something for most of the people we serve, that is something like, hey, I have this job offer on the table and something doesn't quite feel right to me. Or I'm not sure what I want to do next. I could do this, or I could do this, and I've done this before, but I don't really want to do any of them. Where do I go from here? It really is focused on direction setting and helping you determine with a very neutral source what is going to be best for you. And we do that in a number of ways. That is a free service. We provide that to veterans and military spouses. We also have an event annually called the Vet Summit. I don't know if any of y'all made it this year, but the Vet Summit is usually a 2-day virtual conference that focuses on veteran and employment and transition, Vet Summit. And we have a number of different speakers. We have networking opportunities. We have an expo, all that kind of stuff. That's coming up this year in October, I believe. In the new year, we're going to have a mini podcast, basically a 5 to 10 minute podcast that comes out every Monday, really designed to help just encourage and motivate those of you who are in that transition period. And when I say in the transition period, I don't necessarily mean coming out from the military, going into the civilian world. It really is, we have a lot of people who've been out for a while and just have never found that click, never found that fit, and come back. And so that's just as much for our entire tribe as it is for you guys. And the maybe last thing that we're adding, although there's a few things in the work, is next year we will have our own cohort group that is designed specifically to walk you through all the stages of purpose finding. So purpose finding has been become, over the past couple of years, a hot topic in a number of different areas. I promise you, when we started 6-7 years ago, it wasn't. I had a lot of people look at me like, oh, that's real cute. That's very woo-woo of you to, bring up purpose and meaning, and who needs that kind of stuff. But the reality is that I don't know whether it's me wearing them down or multiple voices kind of saying the same thing. Purpose really does matter. It matters in job retention, in education retention, in mental health, in physical health. There are studies all over the place that show the effect of purpose and meaning on the human person. And so really implementing all of those things. In this cohort, we talk about all of the things like identity, roles, values. How do you determine what those are and how they shape your outlook? How do you address the actual and define the actual transition that you're in, right? Because a lot of military men and women, as you transition, it's very easy to think of, I'm going from a job in the military to a job in the corporate or civilian world. The reality is that the transition is not like changing jobs. The transition is on multiple levels. You may be living with family that you have not typically had to be around a whole lot. You may, I see somebody nodding. Yes. You may be switching jobs, but you also may be switching locations. You may be having to move or looking at moving. You may have medical or ability concerns that you didn't have before. There's all of these things that in the veteran perspective are far bigger than just changing a job. So we're going to, like in the cohort, we go through that. It's about 10 weeks long from kickoff to the graduation process, but looking at all that and really helping you identify what purpose is, not just that it's important to have. What is it? How does it fit for you? And really start kind of narrowing down what you think your purpose might be in order to then put that into effect for you within a job, within some type of volunteer or service position, within your family, within all of those other things that you're doing as well. So that's really a kind of a 50,000 foot flyover of what we provide. Like I said, we've got a bunch of stuff in the works. 2023 is going to be a big year for us. So keep your eye out because we may have a lot more coming. But just in general, that's what our focus is. We're not going to place you in a job. That's why we have partners like Seven Eagle to kind of make that additional transition. What we're focused on really is making sure that you are okay, you as a person, two, that you are living up to the calling or the reason that you are here on this earth. Every single person in this room and beyond it is put on this earth for a very specific reason. That's why we're unique. That's why we're built differently. And until you can recognize that individuality within yourself and the uniqueness there, it's really hard to capitalize on it. And so what we want to do is imagine a world where all of our veterans and all of our military spouses are self-actualized and self-aware and running full steam at the thing that they are meant to do on this earth. So again, that does make me sound very woo-woo, but it's important, guys. So that is kind of what I do. That is what the RECON network does. I've kind of talked for a really long stream. I don't even know how long I've been talking for, but I think what might be better, Brenna, you tell me if this is okay, is if anybody has any questions or anything that I can answer about anything we do. Y'all may be tapped out for the afternoon. That's okay too, because I'm about there, right there with you. And I don't know how much further I'm going to get going either. So does that work, Brenna? Would that work for the group?
Yeah. So we did talk a little bit about, I guess we've talked a lot about our identity and purpose. And we've talked about our passions. And so a lot of people in this cohort do have that passion for technology, that passion for breaking the mold, passion for helping others, but still using their hands, but using their minds. And then today we talked a lot about remote work and what that can look like as far as setting the stage for success. Do you have any, can you talk a little bit about being in a remote environment or how you set your schedule, how you make sure that you're taking care of yourself while you're still, being productive?
Sure. As the world's worst person for self-care, I am happy to talk about that subject completely and completely make it up on the fly. No. So I have worked for myself for a number of years now, 6-7 years now. And much of that worked remotely, obviously through the pandemic. A lot of what I do is remote. I also own 2 other companies that are remote based with people across the world. So working remotely is kind of something that I do. And I think when you're working either for yourself or remotely, and I'm saying remotely as in someone's not checking on you, like if you're with a company that has the mouse click thing where they want to make sure you're constantly online, and that, yes, that does happen. And yes, I cannot say that I would be able to work for someone like that, but it does happen. There are reasons for it. But outside of that, if you're working for yourself, if you're kind of having to manage your own schedule, right, then things like time management and self-motivation become increasingly important, because it's really easy for me to sit at home and be like, you know what, I don't even feel like getting dressed today. I'm just going to stay in the PJs and work from the couch and that kind of thing. And before you know, it's 2 o'clock. I've gotten absolutely nothing accomplished, but I've watched 50 cat YouTube videos or TikTok videos, and I'm kind of in a different trance. So it is vitally important that you become as disciplined as you were in the military. A lot of people get out of the military and they're like, I don't need that anymore. I don't have somebody breathing down my throat. I can be my own self. I can manage my own stuff. And then they don't manage their own stuff, right? They get out and the world is your oyster, and then you're kind of lost. And it's like, oh crap, what do I do now? So you really have to be very aware of what the things are that you need to accomplish and how you're going to accomplish them. One of the ways that we work with this, and we do an actual time lab, which is a 2-hour workshop. It's a virtual workshop. It's coming up. We have one coming up. I'm not sure. I think it might be in June of next year, but it's how to manage time, right? And so a few tools that you can use for something like that is time blocking, where you have your calendar, you put your meetings for the day in, and then whatever time you have, you assess the things that you need to do and how long they're going to take, and actually block them into your schedule. It's a very, very effective for making sure you're not overestimating or underestimating the time that you have to spend towards something. The other thing is, if you have a problem with motivation towards working, is something like Pomodoro, which is a period of focus time and then a period of break time. So it's been scientifically proven that they can help you really shift into a high focus mode very quickly. And you can get Pomodoro timers or apps. There's all kinds of stuff out there if you look into that. So I think when you're looking at remote jobs, whether or not someone is constantly monitoring you, you become a better employee and a better resource for them when you can manage your own time, right? When you know this takes exactly this long and I can promise this deliverable and hit it. So that's a very different scenario from just saying, oh, sure, I'll get to that when I get to that, right? So there is a way to actually add value back into that for the employer just by managing your own stuff. Whether you're out on your own, if you even end up out on your own, working remotely or working in the office, all of these tools are things that are helpful to have kind of in your arsenal. So I think that's one thing. And then Brenna, you mentioned one thing that I wanted to mention. You mentioned that there is a lot of passion for like cybersecurity and remote work and all this kind of stuff. And I'd really encourage you guys to figure out what are things that you are passionate about versus what are things that you want to shape the type of life that you want, right? So if you're really passionate about problem solving, you may end up in a career in cybersecurity, but that shouldn't affect whether or not you're remote or not, right? The remote decision is something that you make a decision on, like, I want a remote position because it will take me one step closer to the life that I want. I want to be at home, or I don't like being around people. I don't like being in a cubicle, whatever. So there is a big difference between purpose, passion, although some of those can overlap, and just consciousness of building the type of life that you want. So when you're looking at things like pay scales, remote work or location of work and stuff like that. Those are things, the culture around you, those are things that play into creating a specific type of life that fits within a purpose and fuels a passion, but they're not all the same thing. So I don't know if that's clear. I may have just talked in a bunch of circles, but it's okay. You'll all survive. It's good.
No, I thought that was really, I like that. Trying to take notes as you talk, but I'll probably go back and rewatch parts of this video. It's fantastic. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, I see Stephen's comment. Culture has shifted to value, meaning, and purpose behind the mission, vision, role of the individual and the entire team. Yes, I hope so. It's been a long time coming. And there's still a long way to go. I mean, there are still infinite amounts of companies who only care about that bottom line and what cog you're going to replace to get them to that bottom line. But if you can find a culture that does value your personal meaning, your personal purpose, your personal vision for your life, as well as how it helps them accomplish their goals, that's kind of the sweet spot for any sort of company or any sort of hire.
Yeah. Larissa asked what your other businesses are.
Oh, I have two other companies. One is a consulting. I do publishing and marketing consulting. That was my prior life prior to RECON. And then I co-own a collective of freelance artists around the world who join together and work together as a non-agency agency, so they can get bigger jobs than they would as a individual talent artist.
Well, also, with that, how much percentage of your time do you put in each of those three businesses, like per day, would you say?
Oh, Lord. Well, it just depends on the day. So usually, and really the time of year. So RECON gets a whole lot of attention from like August through November, definitively. And then I can scale back and pull back. I'm fortunate because the collective is run with freelancers and we have a staff there. It's really a leadership role, and the consulting is kind of as I have time to fill in. So I'm fortunate in that I can spend a whole lot of time on RECON and growing it, because that is the ultimate goal, is to really focus on helping you guys and helping people like you, rather than you know, the other things. And the other things basically help pay bills, because I don't take any salary from RECON. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer them.
So what other apps do you use to stay organized when you're going in 3 different directions?
Ooh, okay. So I'll kind of let you guys behind the gate a little bit. Not only do I have 3 different businesses, but also I have 3 teenage kids and a husband, and I have ADHD. So y'all about to get a whole, yes, I see you. I see you have been seen, sir. So
Jimmy's like my people.
so yes, we can identify each other pretty quick. There are a number of apps that I use, because I really use different apps. I mean, I'm the app queen. Like if you needed something to talk to your mother-in-law for you, like I could probably find it or know what it is. So I use a number of different tools depending on the project, depending on the business, and everything else. But as a task manager, I really like Things. Things 3 is the app that I use. It's very much a task management thing, but you can actually set deadlines. You can incorporate docs or files within the to-do, so that you pull up your to-do list for the day and it's got kind of everything all there. I find it simpler than some other things that I've used. I've used ClickUp, but it was very, very complicated for managing the day-to-day. However, ClickUp is great for managing an agency that's working over on the side. So I have just different tools. The other thing that I recently found when I was diagnosed with ADHD, but it actually works for anyone, and I really, really am enjoying this tool, is called Motion. And what it does is it takes all of your to-dos, you go in, you set the to-do, and you give it a time length, and you give it a time frame, like it has to be done by this point, and it's really high priority. So you set all the priorities and all that kind of stuff, and it automatically with AI manages your schedule. So based on the input that you've said is like, okay, all of these things need to be done before this date, and these are high priority, it will automatically schedule your calendar in that time blocking format that I kind of mentioned before. Then all you have to do, you don't have to manage the schedule. You just have to show up in the morning and start working towards the thing. And it incorporates your calendar, so it automatically pulls in those meetings and all that kind of stuff. The other thing I like about it is it has a scheduling tool. So if you're networking, if you're out anywhere, you can basically send someone a link to your calendar, and it comes right in through Motion, sends them reminder apps. Hey, we're going to be showing up on Zoom together at this time. Remember, blah, blah, blah. So it's a really, really great app if you just don't want to manage your schedule. You just want to put in all the stuff that has to be done by when, and just kind of let something else handle it. So those are my top two tools for pretty much everybody.
Cool. I put those in the chat, and then Brandon had a question. So can you discuss potential stigma with hiring companies for those of us that are older and retired or retiring, but not tired, that we're still ready to be structured, and that we have the desire and discipline to jump into a new position, especially some of us looking at entry-level positions in some areas?
Yeah, so that's it's an interesting thing, that one of the things you mentioned, that you're willing or looking to start in entry-level positions, because generally what happens is you get a veteran out, and whether or not you believe it now, from a corporate perspective, the military pays very well. Okay, so when you come out, if you don't have direct linking experience that they can translate, which is why translating your resume for them is so vitally important. But if you don't have that direct thing that translates to the job that you want, you're going to be considered entry level. That's not any sort of indication on you as a person, your past expertise, or anything else. They're looking at it from a bottom line perspective of, has this person, or does this person have the experience that we need to be considered anything other than entry level, or are we going to have to train them as we would the guy who just graduated high school, right? So, or college or wherever. So one, the first thing to answer your question is, don't take things personally. The corporate world is based on whether or not they have a mission, whether or not they have, you know, a private foundation that serves baby rhinos somewhere. Like, regardless, they're a business. If they don't make a bottom line work, they don't exist. So you are a part, as an employee, you are a part of that. So the first thing is, don't take things personally. Some things you can take personally if you've worked there and someone's constantly micromanaging or whatever. But in the job application thing and the hiring, don't take things personally. And I meet a lot of people who get really bent out of shape. They don't understand what I've done and, you know, what experience I bring to the table. I understand that. Part of that is on the veteran or the person to let them know how much you bring to the table. So part of that's on you, the job seeker. Outside of that, you have to assume they are never going to get it, and you still have to fit within that machine, right? So in terms of stigma for older veterans, I know it exists. However, it can also work to your favor, because there is also, as compared to someone who is in and out at 4 years and is 22, I will promise you, if both of you sat down at the table and said how much experience you had, even if it was the same, yours would be considered higher simply because you're older. So play into that where you can. Understand that the stigma exists and it's not personal. That being said, it still sucks. So where you can, really build up that expertise and play on it, because your age will help reinforce expertise as opposed to playing against it. And I hope that makes sense. And I see hands going up everywhere, which is throwing me off. So I don't know who was first. Stephen was first.
No, I appreciate that. Let me lower my hand. Can you take one step back and talk about stigma? Just can you elaborate a little bit on that? Of someone who does 5 years gets out, does 10 years gets out versus 20 years gets out. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a stigma in terms of how long you were in service at all. I think the stigma comes with, how do I, let's say I am a hiring person, never been in the military, don't know anybody who's been in the military, right? And I have a 22-year-old who's going to come to me and tell me how much experience they have and what the military prepared them for, and someone who is 45 and does the same thing. When you're in that situation, it's easier for me, hiring person, to believe that someone who is 45 has a higher degree of experience in whatever they're talking about just because they're older, right? It's the same concept with, I see them on Facebook all the time, these 22-year-old life coaches or 22-year-old gurus. And I'm, there's always going to, they could be very experienced. They could be like, they could knock me out of the park any single day. And part of me is still going to be like, you know what I was doing at 22? You are not an expert. So, like, you are not. It's okay, but you're not. So I think that stigma is more related to the general terms that we look at: age, gender. There are still stigmas out there. I hate to say it, but there are. They honestly, most of them do not care how long you've been in the military. Unless they understand what that means, it does not matter to them. So the stigma, I think, is more in general terms than, I think, related to your personal military experience or your personal military career. I hope that answers the question. Okay, good. Fantastic. Okay, Kevin?
Yes. So I have a question regarding like business or your business. So how did you decide to start your business? At least this one that you have right now on, you have like
the RECON network. Okay,
yes.
So it's an interesting and also boring story. Prior to this, my life, I was in business media. And so I ran a business publication for 15 years. I did a lot of marketing work, a lot of strategic consulting and stuff like that. As a publisher of a business magazine, I had someone come to me and say, hey, this was under then President Obama. We're about to have a huge military drawdown, and we're about to have tens of thousands of people influx to the state. And we want you to look at what that does to our workforce. And so I was coming at the idea from a purely investigative perspective of, what does it mean when you take 10,000 people and push them into a state like South Carolina, where I'm from, and how do you help them find jobs? How do you get them incorporated? And so I really started looking at the transition perspective, right, of the military, of post-military community, and really discovering a lot of like, oh, some of the challenges, it's not just as easy as just pushing everybody to a job. And it's not, there's all these other things. At the same time, my grandfather, who was an Iwo Jima Marine, spent the last 6 months of his life basically reverted back mentally to Iwo Jima, and was very, very hard to see the actual personal response from him, something that he had carried his entire life almost, right? So I was coming at this concept from two different angles. One is the transition experience and the actual mechanics of it, and how to find a job and how to translate easily and all these other things. And then looking at the mental and emotional and physical impacts of that transition through the eyes of someone who had done it and lived it in kind of a different generation, but the same type of thing, right? And so as a publisher, I had access to a huge community of educators and companies. And so we decided to hold job fair, or not a job fair, an event, which eventually became the Vet Summit. It was in its first iteration at that point. And I really thought that I would run it one time and kind of feel satiated and then move on. And what happened is I really started to get really, really passionate about, with encouragement from groups like Soldier for Life and the Pentagon and groups who found out about what we were doing, but started to get really, really passionate about the whole concept of purposeful transition and ensuring that we were addressing the human needs of the men and women who were transitioning rather than just checking them off of a job found list. And so in that, ended up buying that portion away from the company, shutting down the magazine, shifting everything over to RECON, and really looking at how to kind of spread it to a national circuit. So that was way back in 2017. So we've been kind of pushing the same goal since then. But that was very much, when I talk about purpose, when I talk about calling, it's because I found that with RECON, and it's why I don't take a salary. It's what, well, that, and because we're still working on that. But anyway, but it's why I do what I do. No matter if I'm having, if I am working at a couple different companies or a couple of jobs or dealing with something hard, because that purpose always comes back through and says, no, you're meant to be here, suck it up, get back on the horse and let's go. And so you don't have the chance when you are operating in your calling, you don't have the opportunity to sit back. You don't have the opportunity to quit. It's not an option. It shouldn't be an option, right? It should be something that is so in you, that lights you on fire, that even a setback is just a setback. And you keep on going the next day because that's what you're there to do. So I know that was kind of a really circular answer to that question, but did I answer the question, Kevin?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good.
I have
Good.
other ones too. I'm not sure if you're
Sure.
okay with me. Yeah. So you said you didn't take any profit from it. It's like, how do you run it then? Like, is this?
Yeah. So we do
any sort of profit?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yes. So, no veteran or military spouse ever pays for any of our services, period. We are supported by corporate partnerships. And so we have groups like Carolina Handling, Wells Fargo, who support our mission to do what we do. And that's why on some of our channels, you may see us promoting a job that they have, or, telling you about a service that they have. It's kind of the tit for tat there. I don't personally take a salary. My other two companies fund my life. So I am fortunate in that I can focus basically any of the revenue that comes into RECON on building RECON, and that will likely continue for as long as it can be withstood. But the goal is to get it in front of as many people that need it. And so however that ends up happening, it is funded. I am just not funded from it, and that's totally fine.
Oh man. And then my last question is going to be, on your first business, was it a small funded or was it a loan funded business?
Okay, so all of my businesses have been bootstrapped. If you're not familiar with the concept of bootstrapping, it means you don't spend more than what you have. And that may mean that you can go ask for loans. I mean, technically a loan is still within the realm of bootstrapping. I did not, though. I put what I could in and would make it stretch as long as possible on every single business that I had. And I prefer it. I have a value, we talk about values shaping our lives. I don't like owing anyone anything ever. And so me taking out a loan, me finding an investor, anything like that, I've always been very resistant. Not that I will never do it. It may come time to do something like that, but I'm very resistant to owing people things that I don't have immediately available to pay back if I ever needed to. And so no, I didn't take any loans. I don't have any investors, and everything was very much streamlined and bootstrapped from the very beginning. And that's just the way I prefer it. Obviously, there are much faster, getting an investor if you're starting a business is a much faster, easier way to go about it, I promise, but it's not for everybody. Those decisions that are easy and that are, you know, kind of popular are not always meant for everyone. So
Cool.
Awesome. Any other questions?
I do.
Uh-huh.
As a neurotypical person,
yes.
it's a nice way of saying ADHD person. Which one of those apps do you find works the best for you as far as keeping track of your schedule?
I have to use both right now. If I had to pick one, I would say try out Motion first, because it does do a lot of the same things. I had so much going on this fall with RECON and some annual goals on multiple businesses on multiple levels. I have a senior in high school, so there's a lot of stuff going on with him. I had so many to-dos that Motion got really overwhelming for me really quick. But once that scales to a more reasonable level, it will be more manageable. So right now I'm having to juggle the two just to keep track of, like, did I get everything done that had to be done? Because Motion will only book for your time. So even if it's pushed late, it'll just say, oh, well, it's going to be late. It's just going to be done tomorrow. And that is not always an option. So until I got a little bit caught up, I used both of them. But probably in the new year, I'll be going back to Motion foundationally, just because it really does do a lot of things that I needed it to do, and it manages itself.
Thank you.
Anything else? Have I talked y'all's ears off enough yet?
I mean, I have more questions, but I don't want to hold everybody back. So I don't know if you're okay with calling maybe some other time.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we probably have enough time if we're going till 3 for one more. But you know, I'm always available. The one thing, I value authenticity, and I always remember the fact that when I was coming up in my career, I didn't have anyone to turn to, and that always stuck with me. I always promised myself I would always be available for anybody who needed anything from my brain. I mean, if you find it valuable, take it. So I guess let's take one more maybe, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I could probably ask questions all day, to be honest. Like, I could sit down and, like, we can go through the entire day of me just, like, asking stuff. All right, so here's one. What is a non-negotiable when you start a business?
I will tell you what it should be after learning all of these years the hard way. The non-negotiable should be your own personal boundaries. You need to, if you're going to own a business, if you're going to start a business, you need to early on define how much is too much work, how much is too much bringing problems home, how much is where you need to have those boundaries and the commitments. You know, hey, I'm going to commit to a date night every week, or I'm going to commit to doing 3 days at the gym, or I'm going to commit to personal therapy. I mean, my gosh, if we want to talk about the pandemic and what it did, I'm all about some therapy now. But the reality is that if you don't set those boundaries, someone else will, and they don't care about you. They don't care about your marriage. They don't care about your job. They don't care about your company. They don't care about your bottom line. They care about what you're going to do for them. So if you don't set boundaries and hold to them, someone else will set them for you. And before you know it, you're working until 10, 11 o'clock at night. Your spouse, your significant other is feeling really neglected. Your kids don't know who you are. There's always this underlying tone of how you're absent or not there or distracted or whatever. I learned this very, very much the hard way. Set the boundary for yourself. Determine what is important to you and what it will take in your personal life to support that lifestyle or support those needs. and commit to those things, and then don't let anyone else cross them. I mean, if it comes to where, hey, every Friday I'm done at lunch and I spend Friday afternoon with my kids when they get home or whatever. I started doing this last summer, is I don't take meetings on Fridays, period. I don't. And I have to uphold that. That's my job. It's nobody else's job. They don't have to respect that. It's my job to say, oh, hey, yeah, you wanted that meeting on Friday. I am booked Friday. Can we do Monday? That's all it takes to uphold a boundary. It really doesn't take a whole lot, but we're, as humans, notoriously bad about it. So that would be the singular piece of advice. If I tell you one thing, in any circumstance that you're facing, it would be that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, speaking of boundaries, we all know I have to go grab my kids and do a quick wrap up with my team. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jordana. You just always, I always just have notes from every time we talk.
Well, I'm glad it's worth something to somebody. So, and if anybody does need me, our website's recon.vet. You can schedule the transition check-ins. You can find me there. I'm always, like I said, I'm really happy to talk about anything, any questions or any solutions you might want to just brainstorm with somebody. We're here for you. So definitely let us know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I did drop your LinkedIn, both that your personal and the RECON network in the chat. So I recommend everybody follow her and follow RECON network.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Bye.